Hello my friends, welcome back. So today the story of Balor of the Evil Eye, demon king of the Fomorians. Now we're here parked up on the wild Atlantic Way, Donegal on the west coast of Ireland, and we were here yesterday and a lady comes and introduces herself and just puts her elbow up here on our door of our van and tells us all about the story of Balor, which is previously a myth, an Irish myth I'd only ever read about. And she says that Balor's fortress was on Tory Island, right there, just out to sea. And she then proceeds in that typically Irish fashion to relate the story of Balor. So now that has been liberated for the page, for me personally, I would like to pass that story on to you guys. Sarah, by the way, Sarai Humble is her name, works for the Fairy Council of Ireland, restoring fairy wells and holy wells of Ireland, and she's been doing so, living out of her van for the past 8 years. So good on you, Sarah. If you want any more information on the Fairy Council of Ireland, I'll put a link in the description. So the story of Balor, king of the Fomorians, and the birth of Lugh of the long hand, Lugh, the many skilled god. Long ago, in deep time, the children of Danu, the Tuatha De Danann, arrived on this shore right here to claim Ireland for themselves. They arrived out of a mist, and as soon as they arrived on these shores, they burnt their ships. Problem was, this island was already inhabited by its indigenous inhabitants, the Firvolk. There was an epic battle, the deeds of which I will not relate in this story. The king of the Tuatha De Danann lost his arm, it was severed, but eventually the Tuatha De Danann were victorious and they laid claim to Ireland. And they drove off the Firvolk to the various other islands around Ireland. I don't know, the Hebrides, the Isle of Man, Anglesey, mainland Britain, who knows. Thing is, when they did this, they awakened a much older class of being that already existed on these islands and under the sea. These beings were called the Fomorians. The name means the under the sea ones. So sometimes they're described as sort of aquatic and scaly and fish-faced, a bit like the Finn people in the last story I told. But really, the Fomorians are part of a class of being in Indo-European mythology similar to the Titans of Greek mythology, or the Asura, the jealous gods of Vedic mythology, and of course the frost giants of Norse mythology. These are primordial beings of great magical power. Sometimes they're described as just being as a different class of god, just like the Children of Danu, beautiful and powerful, but just as much they're described as hideously, almost comically ugly. Sometimes some of them just have one eye and one foot and one arm, like this. Now, one of the Fomorians, his name was Balor. Balor of the Evil Eye, or Balor of the Baleful Eye, and his eye could kill. The story of how he got this eye, one day when he was a young little Fomorian demon prince child, he was just scurrying along and he was walking past somewhere he shouldn't have been, where the druids, the dark magicians, were brewing their potions, and he could hear the chanting happening inside this hut, and he climbed up and just peeped down through a hole and peered right into the heart of this cauldron, this potion brewing, and right then the words of power were spoken, and a great plume of smoke went and hit Balor right in the middle of his one eye, because he was a Cyclops, like Polyphemus. He fell to the ground, screaming in agony, and the druids and the magicians came out and said, "Ah, you daft sod, you know what you've done? We were brewing the potion of death. Now you have the eye, the evil eye, and whenever you open your eye, whatever you're looking at will fall dead. A terrible curse and a terrible weapon." This is a bit like in folk magic, where the idea of the evil eye comes from. If ever you've been to Greece or Turkey and get one of those little eyes, little protective charm, very common thing in a lot of European folk magic, the evil eye. And the point here in this myth, you can't choose who you direct it at. So Balor had the evil eye. Now, among his own people, he would always keep his eye closed. But when his enemies were around, he would open up that eye and zoom, it would kill 100 men at once. Zoom, just a laser beam would come up like Cyclops of the X-Men fame and just eviscerate everything in its sight. Zoom. Now, as he got older and grew larger and larger, sometimes these mythological figures seem to sort of change in size and shape depending on what sort of aspect you're looking at the myth through. But Balor built himself a huge tower of crystal right out there on what is now called Tory Island. Huge crystal tower that at night glowed red. And as he got older and older, his eyelid grew so heavy and he'd always keep it closed, yet he would always see by some third eye the ships coming and going around his island. And it was said that his eyelid grew so heavy that his people would put a great iron ring through it, and it would take 10 Fomorians just to lift it, but when it did, it would kill hundreds and hundreds. Now, from his island fortress, Balor would send forth pirates in ships that would raid the coast of Ireland. So the children of Danu, who had just recently set up their kingdom, the high seat of the kings on the plain of Tara, they were finding their lands being raided by these demons. They had awoken some old ancient energy in the place. But whenever they sent ships out to try and, tackle Balor on his island, just zoom, it's like the eye of Sauron, but 100 times worse. His eye would just open at the top of the tower and it would just turn the entire seas to steam and just burn these ships on the water. So Balor was impregnable. But Balor's druids foretold a prophecy that his grandson would depose and kill Balor. One of those prophecies. So Balor had one child, a daughter. She was very, very beautiful. So to save his own skin, he locked her in the top of that tower and gave her 12 female companions that would dote on her and play games with her. But Balor forbade that they should ever talk about boys or even mention that they existed. So Balor's daughter, she had a nice life and grew up in splendid isolation at the top of this crystal tower on this island far out to sea. But she was lonely, desperately lonely, and she would sometimes see the ships passing in the sea below her, and these figures rowing, and she would think, oh, don't they look nice? And she would wonder what they were, and she would ask her various female companions, but they would not speak a word. Moreover, at night, in her dreams, the same face would show itself to her again and again and again. This handsome face. Again, she would ask her companions about it, but they were stumm. Now, meanwhile, Balor was growing in confidence, knowing that he could not be slain. His raiding parties would be going out, raiding the communities of the Tuatha, and he would demand tribute. You've heard this all before. He would demand 1/3 of the cattle, 1/3 of the grain, 1/3 of everything, and 1 in every 3 children would have to be sent to his island as slaves. Now, not content with all of this? Balor desired a certain cow, a certain magic cow that never runs dry of milk. Some people say, in fact, Sarah yesterday suggested that this may have been the primordial cow that we see in so many world mythologies, whose milk is the Milky Way. That primordial cosmic cow that we see in Vedic and Norse mythology the world over. Again, this is one of those ways in which myths seem to change their size or shape depending on what glass we're looking at them through, because in this story it's just a bloody cow. Anyway, this cow belongs to a certain young prince of the Tuatha Dé called Cian. And to cut a long story short, Balor, with the help of his druids, changes his shape into a little red-haired boy and takes a little currach over to the mainland and tricks Cian out of that cow and pulls it into the sea off to his island. And Cian vows that he will get that cow back. Now, none of the druids can help him. They are all very, very, very afraid of Balor and his evil eye. But Cian, he has supernatural help. In some stories it's described as a druidess that lives on the wild shore, just somewhere along the way here. In other versions of this story it's actually a Len she. It's a fairy mistress of Cian's, a helper in the other world, sort of like a familiar or guardian spirit. We all have one, but this young man was particularly in touch with his. So what she did, this druidess or this fairy mistress, she changed his form into that of a woman and then created a gust of wind that carried Cian up, away over the sea, right over this beach here to Tory Island, and then right onto the very top of the Tower of Balor. And then with another spell, she put all of the companions, every single Fomorian in that tower into a magical sleep, except the daughter of Balor herself. Then, when Cian entered the chamber of the daughter of Balor, they locked eyes and they realized in that moment that each other was the one that they had been dreaming about for all these years. Well, one thing led to another, and there was a little baby on the way. That was to be Lugh of the long arm. Now, to cut a long story short, Cian was whisked away by his fairy mistress. And he was very, very sorrowful to be parted from his loved one, and the feeling was mutual. But 9 months later, Balor finds he has a grandson, and the prophecy was coming true. So what does he do? Just like Kronos in Greek mythology, he plucks a baby up. He doesn't eat it, though. He throws the child into the sea. Drowned. Done with. That baby there is then plucked up by the same gust of wind of Cian's fairy mistress again and carried away in safety to Ireland. Lugh grows up. He's taught many, many skills. He's taught to play the harp. He's taught to hunt. He has many, many good foster parents. I'm told that one of them was even Mananan Maclir, the god of the sea himself. Until one day, Lugh arrives at the court of the High King Nauda at Tara, and he just arrives at the door, a young, brash youth. I'm reminded here of Percival, Peridor, arriving at the court of King Arthur, and it just being all a bit chaotic. He arrives and challenges each one of the Children of Danu's champions to a game of chess, or skill at the harp, or craftsmanship, or skill in combat, and he beats every single one. So Nauda, the king, and the Children of Danu and the court of the High King have no choice but to accept this brash young lad Lugh into their ranks. just in the nick of time, because Balor has been raising his armies and has sent over scores, hundreds and hundreds of ships and thousands of these demons with many arms and single eyes and, I don't know, crows bursting out of their chests. And the demons are descending on the coast of Ireland. So the time for the battle is at hand. The Fomorian armies are marching on Tara. There's lots of potential sites for the battle, but some of them are just round here on these, down this wild Atlantic way here. And Balor is advancing, huge, 200 feet, 300 feet tall he is. He's a giant Cyclops. The Doida too, the good god, he's fucking massive. He's got his club. They're wading into battle. The Doida's just smashing Fomorians left, right and centre like he's playing golf. The Morrigan is in the form of a crow, the goddess of war and death, circling, wheeling in the sky. There's a steel storm, an arrow storm of blood. There's battle cries here and there. Balor himself, he doesn't even need to open his eye. He is just slaying the children of Danu left, right and centre. And then Nauda of the silver arm, actually his arm's been replaced with a flesh one now by magic. He, with his magic sword, he is seeking out the demon Balor, and they face each other off. And Balor, he doesn't even need to open his eye. He's blind, mind. With one swoop of his sword, he cuts the king of the Tuatha De Danann clean in two. This is a heavy moment for the children of Danu, for the gods of Ireland. But the Morrigan, she in crow form, issues a rallying cry, and there Lugh steps forward and he begins to mock Balor, not fight him nobly like Nauda did. He just taunts, he jeers at him. This is a trickster moment. Lugh is part trickster, you see. This is a real David and Goliath moment. And at that, Balor summons his men and says, right, I'm going to lay eyes on this little shit that dares to taunt me. So his men, get the winches and pulleys. They begin to pull up his eye. And there he sees this little blonde bastard, and his eye just begins to charge up. In a minute, great laser beams just going to eviscerate the entire army of the Tuatha De Danann. But just at that moment, Lugh, he's got his sling, boom, and just when that eye is at its point where it's just about to erupt a beam of death and kill everyone, this boulder of a slingshot goes boom, and burst out the back of his head, knocking Balor's eye with it out the back of the giant's skull and down into the amassed ranks of the Fomorian demon army, where it then boom went off like a atomic bomb, like a meteorite striking Earth. A huge explosion that eviscerated the entire army of the Fomorian demons. And whatever survivors there were scuttled back to the shore here and fled across the sea, never to trouble Ireland again. And Lugh, now Nauda was no more, was made king of the Tuatha De Danann at Tara. So, my friends, that is the story of Balor and the Evil Eye. I'm sure you'll all see the similarities with a lot of the old conflicts between, say, the Olympian gods of the ancient Greeks and the Titans and the Aesir and the Vanir and the Frost Giants, the Devas and the Asuras, part of that old cosmic game between the battle between good and evil. But, my friends, that conflict gives dynamism to life. Thank you very much for watching.